The Final Fantasy series has a special place in the hearts of many people, having mostly dominated the JRPG market on the first and second generation Nintendo systems. After the epic story told in Final Fantasy VI, it was difficult to imagine where the franchise would go next. What else could they possibly do? In 1997, along came Final Fantasy VII, a game that presented a vision of what JRPGs could be, paving the way for a plethora of adjacents that filled the Sony PlayStation library, and also represented the first time that a main series title was released internationally, including in PAL territories. When the executives at Square dreamed about what they wanted to do next, they dreamed big and went all in, creating a game spanning 3 physical discs that captured the imagination of millions through its revolutionary graphics and cinematic storytelling. Yes, it's finally time to step into the Sony PlayStation era of the Final Fantasy series, and I am all here for it. This is my jam. For the purposes of this review, I played the original game for the Sony PlayStation. It is difficult for me to articulate just how much of an impact this game had at the time of its release, not just on the market, but also on me. I was about 12 years old, and remember picking it up from Network Video, not quite knowing what I'd be getting myself into, as the packaging gave no hints on what to expect, with its plain white case and the iconic logo printed front and centre. My first impression was the rolling starscape that seemed to go on forever, before it changed to a full motion video, FMV sequence, highlighting the gritty city of Midgar. I was hooked from that moment. I didn't have a memory card at the time, so would restart whenever I died. I died against Hellhouse, Reno, Rufus. And I had thought that the game was entirely set in Midgar. How wrong I was. I saved my pocket money for 12 weeks, a true testament to patience and budgeting, until I was able to afford the game and a memory card. Once I had both in my hands, the game was my oyster, and I sucked up every pixel, MP3, and piece of lore that I could, like a power-hungry Mako reactor, bleeding the planet dry. It was a game that resonated with me, and came at a pivotal time of my life, my first year of high school. We step into the boots of Cloud Strife, a self-proclaimed ex-member of a high-tier military group known as Soldier. After an amazing fanfare and introduction to the size and scope of the city of Midgar, we are thrust straight into the action as a train pulls into the depot of a Mako reactor, unloading a bunch of stowaways that make quick work of the guards. We soon learn that our objective is to join this group of vigilantes, known as Avalanche, in blowing up the reactor. Yes, it seems we are eco-terrorists. After successfully completing the mission, we see the collateral damage in the destroyed buildings, the overturned vehicles, and the sheer chaos as people run around disorientated by the blast. Separated from the rest of the group, as it's too dangerous to travel together, Cloud meets a girl selling flowers amidst the ruins. Little does he know at the time, but this chance meeting, and another later after blowing up the Sector 5 Mako reactor, sets him on a path for self-discovery about his identity and what it means to live and leave those you care about behind. At the time, I didn't have the language for it, but looking back now, that feeling of being lost in a place far bigger than yourself is something I understood far more than I realized. The cast of Final Fantasy VII is large, maybe not as big as that of Final Fantasy VI, but still sits at 9 strong if you take the time to recruit the 2 optional characters. Despite the larger cast compared to some of the earlier titles, I felt that all cast members got an adequate backstory and equally contributed to the narrative, including the optional characters, the former having direct ties to Shinra, and the latter being its former war enemy. When I first played the game, I had clear favourites and sidelined most of the characters, but this time around, I ended up rotating them around, and everyone equally shared the bench. Besides Cloud, who cannot be removed from the party by the player. I ended up going into the final battle with Cid and Tifa, something that I hadn't planned. I just felt like on Christmas Day that I wanted to finish the game and thought, Why not, with my current party? It's rare to have a cast of entirely likable characters, each with some depth to them, but I genuinely feel that Square pulled it off with this title. Every time the party stopped to discuss what was happening, I felt like I was there with them, a comrade in arms in their search for the elusive man in a black cape who always seemed to be sighted one step ahead of us. The world inhabited by our cast is similar to our own, only instead of fossil fuels, wind and water turbines used to power the grid, Final Fantasy VII's world is powered by Mako energy, the life of the planet itself, and it is said that this act is killing the world. The narrative of life being made easier through the use of Mako energy without repercussion is propagated by the International Shinra Electric Power Company, or Shinra for short, who also dabble in weapon manufacturing, as well as nefarious research and experimentation on humans. Anything that can push the agenda of Shinra forward is taken. No bars held, no questions asked. It's almost alarming to observe how much the company gets away with, and no one can square up to them to hold them accountable. Playing as an adult, this feels relatable, as it reflects an image of a world we know all too well, with injustices being enacted by power-hungry people, and nothing can be done about it. Whilst the world is vast and full of many locations, I felt that some of the earlier dungeons were small in comparison to places you explore later. I guess this can be attributed to Square opting to have the environments as pre-rendered 3D backgrounds. Whilst I enjoy this aesthetic, and it's probably my favourite way for a game to be presented, it was a little disappointing that some of the earlier environments suffered because of this. Take the Mithril Mines for example. It can't have been more than 5 screens big, and felt like it was over before it had a chance to even begin. Despite this, I enjoyed exploring every inch of every map to find hidden chests and materia lying around that I could use to bolster my party. You may also turn on an option to assist with navigation that highlights the exits, climbable objects, and where Cloud was at any given point. However, I felt that sometimes this was a little inconsistent. I did enjoy that it was an included feature, as at the time of the game's release, going from 2D sprites to full 3D environments meant that it was sometimes confusing to figure out where to go next. It was genius that Square thought about this, to ensure those not familiar with these types of environments could acclimate without getting pissed off and returning the game for a refund. As you move through the different locations, you will be pulled into random encounters, and I thought that the frequency of these was fair. I never felt like the game was throwing me into battles that I wasn't ready for, and the enemy scaling keeps things just challenging enough as you progress. Combat presents 3 party members lined up on the left, facing off against groups of enemies. Positioning matters here. Enemies can back attack you or catch you in a pincer, and you can do the same to them if you're lucky. The Active Time Battle (ATB) system returns once again with the familiar active and wait options alongside a new third choice, Recommend. Wait pauses everything whilst you make decisions. Active permits enemies to keep swinging while you're buried in menus. And Recommend strikes a nice middle ground by pausing combat during long animations. That extra breathing room is especially welcome if, like me, you enjoy leaning into summon materia and some of the flashier spells whilst you sort through your mess of an inventory. At its best, Final Fantasy VII's combat feels strategic, without being stressful, and flexible enough to suit how you want to play. Before moving on to party customization, it's worth talking about limit breaks. While they technically do appear in Final Fantasy VI, this game is where the system really comes into its own. As characters take damage from enemies, their limit gauge fills. Once it maxes out, their next turn charges rapidly, and replaces the standard attack command with limit, allowing a character to unleash a powerful ability that can deal massive damage or support the party in different ways. Each character has 4 tiers of limit breaks, with the final level often tied to optional or side content, and unlocking them all is part of the fun. They're flashy, rewarding, and perfectly designed to make bad situations feel salvageable, or great ones feel incredible. I briefly mentioned Materia in passing earlier, and this is really the backbone of Final Fantasy VII's customization. Materia is a crystallized form of Mako that allows people to use magic, commands, and special abilities when slotted into weapons or armor. There are 5 main types: magic, command, support, independent, and summon. Some materia works independently, whilst others must be paired, and I took a lot of enjoyment in experimenting with what worked best for my party. Pairing complementary materia like Restore and All completely changes how you pull yourself out of a pickle. Materia also grows as characters do, leveling up and splitting when reaching max level, birthing new replicas to equip to other characters, though this does take dedication. Equipment choices matter too. Some gear boosts materia growth, some have connected slots, and others can halt growth entirely. It means you are constantly weighing raw stats against long-term progression. The result is a system that's deep without being overwhelming, and still incredibly fun to experiment with, even now. For example, cover and counter on the same character became staple for those I wanted to quickly build the limit breaks of, at the risk of them dying from taking one too many smacks to the face. Chocobos have been part and parcel of the Final Fantasy series since the second game, often filling in as a mode of transport and a cute mascot. They make an appearance again here and can be raced at the Gold Saucer, a theme park where you can enjoy minigames that you may have played throughout the game, like G-Bike, snowboarding, or the submarine chase. The prime attraction is Chocobo racing though, which takes a dedicated breeder to source, capture, raise, and breed to win. I thought I'd try my hand because why not? And quickly found that animal rearing is definitely not one of my talents. For starters, the Chocobo I managed to catch was incredibly lethargic and weak. Okay, I thought, let's feed it some greens and get it up to speed. It can't possibly be all that bad. And then we decided to race. Did I accidentally capture a Chocobo that embodied the spirit of Fat Chocobo? Within seconds, I was lagging behind and had to wait until the first couple of races crossed the finish line before I was even able to cancel out of the race. Even the race props felt so sorry for me that they thought they'd put me out of my misery. One thing I really appreciate about Final Fantasy VII is that for all of its heavy themes, it's never afraid to be completely ridiculous. The War Market section, for example, sees Cloud, a brooding, emotionally repressed ex-soldier, dressing up as a woman to infiltrate a mansion. This is not just a brief throwaway gag either. An entire questline is designed around this, with the ultimate prize being Cloud getting chosen as the bride of the decrepit Don Corneo. Not sure how great of a prize that is, but some people's trash are another's treasure, I guess. It's absurd, it's camp, and it works because the game commits to it entirely, even going so far as to make Cloud bathe with a bunch of 70s era dressed macho men in a very seedy, let's call it for what it is, brothel. Moments like this stop the game from collapsing under the weight of its own seriousness. They give the world texture, remind you that it's okay to have fun, and make the darker moments contrast brilliantly. Now, I did want to take some time to talk a little bit about the general themes of the game, which may walk into spoiler territory, so I will place that caveat here. If you don't want to be spoiled, please skip to the timestamp listed here. Okay? 3, 2, 1. At its core, Final Fantasy VII is a game that presents grief and how we as humans deal with it. When someone we love passes, do we just give up? Do we get angry? Do we cry? Or do we laugh at the many faces of fate who brought us to this point? The cast of characters all have some form of grief or regret in their life that they have had to deal with, be it Tifa's loss of her parents, Barrett's loss of his wife and town, Cid's loss of his dream to go into space, and even Yuffie's loss of cultural heritage, and anger at her father doing nothing about it, whilst Wutai is turned into a Shinra tourist trap. And then there's the big elephant in the room, the death of Aeris, and how not only the party, but you as the player, comes to terms with this. When I first experienced this event, I had not seen it coming, and I was devastated, as I had used her almost religiously. Even now playing the game again, and knowing that this was coming, it still punched me in the gut seeing how other characters reacted to her death, echoing the grief that I was also feeling. It was a bold move for Square to kill off one of its main characters, partway into the game, but I feel like it paid off as it generated a lot of discussion and rumours at the time about how you could potentially revive her. with some of these rumoured methods even being printed in magazines in the 90s. Visually, I know that many people these days won't vibe with the blocky character models, even if you enjoy the 3D pre-rendered backgrounds. But for me, I think that the blocky models are part of the game's charm. And in spite of these polygonal figures, I believe that the emotional scenes were directed in a way that evoked the emotion that the scene was going for. So you don't need those fang-dangled graphics anyway. I certainly teared up a couple of times on this replay. Models are more detailed in battle, and I enjoyed the variety to monsters, flashy spells, limit breaks, and summons, though I do wonder why Shinra decided to build a cannon that looks like it was ripped straight out of Wutai. Were they trying to mock or intimidate their enemy, or did they steal the design when they subjugated them? The FMV scenes serve to impart the gravity of situations, or the sheer size and scope of a location. They never felt added just for the sake of it, and I always looked forward to them. Probably why I generally tended to make a beeline through the story as a kid. And who could blame me? Nobuo Uematsu poured his heart and soul into this soundtrack, and it really shows. You think you were impressed by the opera in Final Fantasy VI? Wait until you hear One Winged Angel. I appreciated that many of the tracks were thematically linked with leitmotifs, and each character had their own distinct theme that represented them. My favourite track is called Listen to the Cries of the Planet, which plays in a beautiful yet foreboding place that you enter, unsure of quite what to expect. The distorted 6-note synth backed by tolling bells that builds to a choir of echoing ghosts fits the environment so well. A city that has been lost to time, carved into an aesthetic that evokes the theme of water, flowing, and the life stream. As a kid, and even now, I revisit this track and feel awed by the mystery of it, while standing amidst the lost city of the ancients. Coming back to Final Fantasy VII all these years later, I was half expecting the magic to fade. You know the feeling? Sometimes when you revisit something that meant a lot to you as a child, you realise that it should have stayed safely preserved in your memory, untouched and unexamined. But that didn't happen to me here. In fact, it was the opposite. What struck me the most this time around wasn't just the ambition of it all, but how the human experience resonates. Beneath the sci-fi dystopia, the eco-terrorism, the super soldiers, and the guy with the world's longest katana, Final Fantasy VII is a story about loss, identity, regret, and finding a reason to keep moving forward when the world feels like it's falling apart around you. And that hits a lot harder as an adult than it ever did as a kid. Restarting the game for the 10th time, because Rufus had just kicked my ass because I didn't equip a restore materia. It isn't perfect, some dungeons are brief, some systems show their age, and yes, the character models do look like they could qualify as abstract art. But none of that stops the game from achieving what it set out to do. Square didn't just make a successful leap to the PS1, they redefined what a JRPG could be, and in so doing, changed the trajectory of the genre forever. For me, Final Fantasy VII will always be more than just a landmark title. It was a companion during a formative time of my life, a window into stories that trusted their audience to feel deeply, and proof that a video game could be emotional, challenging, strange, and unforgettable all at once. Revisiting it now didn't diminish this, it reinforced it. So whether this is your first trip to Midgar, or your 20th time being awed by the searchlight revealing that familiar logo, Final Fantasy VII remains a powerful reminder of why this innovative series, and this medium, means so much to so many people, and is still relevant today. By the way, what was a PS1 game that deeply impressed you? Let me know in the comments. This has been Venoix with a review of Final Fantasy VII for the PS1. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more great JRPG content. As always, thanks for the time that you spend watching my videos. I appreciate you. Take care of yourselves, and bye bye for now.